This is VOA Africa.
Good evening, I'm Esther Gitu-Ewart. It's Tuesday, February 25th. This is Africa 54. Egypt's former longtime president Hosni Mubarak dies at 91. A celebration of life as thousands attend a memorial for retired basketball superstar Kobe Bryant and his daughter Gianna. And in our health report, Africa 54 takes a closer look at making vaccinations more accessible across the continent. We begin tonight with the death of former Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak, who passed away Tuesday at the age of 91. He was long seen as the symbol of stability in the Middle East, but was eventually ousted in a popular uprising. Elizabeth Arrott looks back at the man called by some a modern pharaoh.
Hosni Mubarak held power for nearly 30 years and, like many Arab leaders of his time, made his country a personal fiefdom. He placed friends and family in positions of power and appeared to be grooming his son to succeed him. Until 18 stunning days in early 2011, when it all came to an end. His vice president announced the news.
In these difficult circumstances that Egypt is going through, President Mubarak decided to resign from his post as the president, and he requested the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces to run the affairs of the country, and God help us all.
Within months, he was in a courtroom cage on trial for the killing of protesters. He was sentenced to life in prison. It was an almost unthinkable political end to the man who was the only president most Egyptians knew. Yet the presidency was not something he had sought. In 1981, Islamists killed President Anwar Sadat, in part for making peace with Israel. Vice President Mubarak was by his side. The assassins propelled him to the leadership of the country. During the 1973 Arab-Israeli War, Mubarak had risen to fame as head of Egypt's Air Force. That made him unlikely to carry forward the peace deal with Israel. But with huge financial incentives from the United States, he remained committed to the treaty. At the same time, he mended relations with Arab nations that had shunned Egypt for its overture. To keep the peace at home, he instituted emergency laws, an emergency that lasted for decades. Hussein Abdul Razak is the former head of the left-wing Tagamu party.
The most important objective he sought is to achieve stability and security.
That security came at a price, with rights groups and opponents claiming widespread torture. On the economic front, Mubarak promised reforms, but poverty and unemployment grew. When Islamic extremists killed Egyptians and foreign tourists, Mubarak cracked down. But in doing so, he also marginalized moderate Islamists, only increasing their grassroots support. According to political analyst Hisham Qasim, Mubarak, more than anything, lacked a vision.
We're not talking only about somebody who was really the chargé d'affaires of a country for 30 years and practically did nothing, okay? He was like the Mr. Night Shift, out there to hand over the place to the morning shift. This is his legacy. But he was ultra corrupt, ultra corrupt.
Some say it was the grooming of his son Gamal that proved the final straw. Saeed Sadiq of the American University in Cairo.
If you look at, especially since this succession project started, that his son would take over, the popularity of this regime declined tremendously.
Sadiq says the middle class, hurt by Mr. Mubarak's policies, led the revolt against him. But even during his trial, he had his supporters. Mr. Mubarak saw himself as a paternal figure. It's an image he played upon in his final days in office. But his defiance only reminded the protesters of his refusal to do more for his country while in power. Elizabeth Arrett, VOA News, Cairo.
The World Food Programme says it needs $103 million to meet urgent food assistance in Zimbabwe, where more than half the population is food insecure due to recurring drought and a declining economy. Columbus Mavunga reports from Eastern Muzi district, one of the country's most affected areas.
Zimbabwe's Muzi district on the border with Mozambique is one of the areas most affected by severe food shortages. 75-year-old farmer Justina Marimbindi says months of recurring drought decimated her crops.
My granary is now empty. This is my field. We farm, but it does not bear fruits. I sold my goats. There is no hope that there is anything that will come out of the fields. We now depend on these handouts.
But not every Zimbabwean who needs food aid is getting it. 94-year-old Rudia Kugwenya was turned away at the local distribution center.
I was told that my name is not on the list. Maybe they'll give me next time. For now, I have to depend on my daughter. That's why I've come to her home after I was not given anything. But she needs food assistance too, as her crops failed and she needs to feed her children.
Recent rains in the area are bringing some hope that Zimbabwe's devastating droughts may be over. But the World Food Programme says almost 8 million people will still require food aid until the next harvest.
Difficult for rural populations who are struggling with the lack of rain to grow enough food to meet their needs, and difficult for urban populations who are unable to find the piecemeal work that they normally rely on and are seeing rising prices and sometimes stock shortfalls in the shops. So we're scaling up our programs, but in order to sustain urgent food assistance and resilience programs, we need an additional $103 million for the next 6 months.
But even if food supplies can recover, Zimbabwe's struggling economy and sky-high inflation will continue to squeeze the country's most vulnerable. Columbus Mavunga for VOA News, Muzi, Zimbabwe.
Technology is finally able to make food appear. With help from a local NGO, hungry kids in Kenya can now get a hot lunch for a few pennies with just a tap of their wrists. It happens using short-range Wi-Fi. VOA's Arashar Basadi has the details.
This kitchen changes the lives of poor kids in Kenya. Here at Feeding the Future, cooks make some of the food that today will feed as many as 10,000 hungry kids.
Millions of children in Africa go to school on an empty stomach. A lot of times they make the decision whether to go to school or look for food elsewhere. Food for Education is trying to solve this problem by providing low-cost, nutritious meals so that children are able to stay in school and learn.
And here's where lunch goes high-tech, with a bright orange bracelet called Tap to Eat, says group founder Wawira Nijiru.
Tap to Eat is a technology developed by Food for Education that enables parents to contribute 15 shillings, 15 cents for every meal. We use it through mobile money, which is quite prevalent in Kenya. And through that, parents are able to top up easily the 15 shillings for kids to get lunch with. And the children, once they come to school, just tap to eat and get lunch under 5 seconds.
The school's principal says attendance is up, and so too are median test scores. A parent named Lucy says the program changed her family's life.
When Tap to Eat wasn't available, we suffered a lot. Sometimes your child carries cold food. Sometimes you lack the money, and your child has no lunch.
Food for Education says it uses smart logistics to ensure they produce food sustainably while ensuring local farmers receive a reliable source of income. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News, Washington.
20,000 mourners record the lives of international basketball legend Kobe Bryant and his daughter Gianna, who were killed in a helicopter crash last month. Michael Sullivan reports from Los Angeles, where Bryant played his entire career with the Lakers.
Kobe Bryant joined the Los Angeles Lakers straight out of high school in 1996 and played with the team for 20 years, most of that time here at Staples Center. The sports icon and his 13-year-old daughter died with 7 others when their helicopter crashed January 26th near Los Angeles. There were tributes from Bryant's widow, Vanessa Bryant, grieving for her husband and daughter, and from a tearful Michael Jordan, who remembered his younger rival as a brother. Called a celebration of life, there was laughter mixed with tears and musical tributes from Christina Aguilera, Beyoncé, and Alicia Keys. For many fans, Bryant was part of the family.
You know, growing up, that's all we watched in the 1990s up to the 2000s. My parents, my brother, everyone. So this today is very important for us as a family. My brother's here, my dad is here, I'm here.
I didn't know him personally, but he's been part of my life longer than some of my actual friends. And you could trace back certain moments of him and where you were at and what you were going through at the same time.
Kobe Bryant, growing up, he was my idol, so I played basketball myself and, just pay my respect here today.
I watched him grow. I watched Kobe come into the league. I was there in D.C. for his last game when he retired. And it just means a lot to me right now.
A sports legend and his daughter who live on in the hearts of his fans. Mike O'Sullivan, VOA News, Los Angeles.
During his trip to India Tuesday, U.S. President Donald Trump took a shot at the field of Democratic presidential candidates, calling them radical and out of control, and warning of economic disaster if any of them wins the election in November. Speaking in New Delhi at a business roundtable featuring Indian business people and investors, Trump touted the economic accomplishments of his administration and took questions from the audience. When he received a question about health care, Trump set aside a long-standing tradition of not discussing domestic politics while on foreign soil and criticized the Affordable Health Care Act, commonly known as Obamacare, and Democratic proposals for health care. Separately, Trump said the Democratic candidates seeking to unseat him don't know what they are doing and warned that the stock market growth that the United States has enjoyed under his administration will end if he is not reelected.
I think that, frankly, until the election is over, our market, it's phenomenal, but our market will jump thousands and thousands of points if I win. If I don't win, you're going to see a crash like you've never seen before. I really mean it, too.
Trump predicted he would win re-election. He also blamed Monday's U.S. stock market plunge on the coronavirus, but predicted, quote, it's going to work out fine. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, the challenges of making vaccines more accessible across the continent. We'll be back.
Is about more than just sitting here and talking about women's issues. It's about listening to them
and bringing their opinions to the table and making sure their voices are heard.
Because our lived experiences, our stories, and our voices will help shape the next generation.
I do. Ooh.
I'm Clara Frank, and here's what's trending. The John Deere tractor kicks up a cloud of dust as it zigzags across a sun-drenched field, raking up dry grass and dropping bales of hay in its wake at a farm in Nanyuki, central Kenya. The world's leading farm equipment maker is outfitting its tractors with startup Hello Tractor technology, which allows farmers to hail the machines via an app, monitors the vehicle's movements, and transmits usage information such as fuel levels. Deere is currently testing the technology on around 400 tractors in Ghana and Kenya. It plans to roll out the devices across Africa later this year, offering it to all contractors who buy its equipment on the continent. Next up, the demand for surgical masks is soaring in Hong Kong as people seek to protect themselves from the spread of the coronavirus. Now, volunteers are making reusable masks to give to medical workers. The fabric masks have 3 layers. The outside layer is made out of cotton, the middle is waterproof fabric, and the inside layer is made out of breathable, moisture-absorbing cotton. And finally, Balloon Dog by Moose Toys, Lego Dots, and in real-life toys, such as toys inspired by YouTube channel Ryan's World, were popular among visitors of the 2020 New York Toy Fair on Monday, a day before the event was scheduled to finish. Participants are part of the toy industry, which has total annual economic impact in the United States of $97 billion, according to the fair's organizer, the Toy Association. And that's what's trending today.
It's time for our health report, and joining us now is A54 Health correspondent Lino Mudu with an update on the coronavirus. Hello, Lino.
Hello, Esther. And the coronavirus outbreak is upending air travel and causing people to question the safety of cruises. Travelers are canceling trips to Asia, and some are even refraining from eating Chinese food prepared in countries that don't have a widespread outbreak of the virus called COVID-19. VOA's Carol Pearson tells us about the most important safety measure when traveling.
Doctors have warned for a long time that an infectious disease anywhere is potentially a disease everywhere. Case in point is the global spread of HIV/AIDS. Another case, SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome. It was discovered in China in February 2003, and like the current coronavirus epidemic, the government had to build special hospitals. Before SARS was finished 6 months later, it had spread to more than 24 countries, mostly through air travel. Toronto was especially hard hit, with more than 400 cases and 44 deaths.
Air transportation network is the main pathway for a global disease spread.
Think of all the things you and tens of thousands of others touch at an airport and in an airplane. A study from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology shows that very few people in an airport have clean hands. And if we want to slow an epidemic, we have to have clean hands.
First of all, we try to calculate if the rate of hand washing around the world.
Previous studies showed that 70% of people wash their hands after using a toilet. And out of that number, only 6 or 7% do it correctly.
So correctly, I mean they wash their hands with soap and water for at least 15 seconds. We did some back-of-the-envelope calculations, and we found out that if you visit an airport any time in the world, you will realize that only 1 over 5 people have clean hands.
Nicolaides then looked at what he calls super spreader airports.
A super spreader airport is an airport that combines 2 characteristics. The first one is that has a lot of traffic, transfers a lot of people around. And the other characteristic is that it's connected with many other airports, with many other international flights.
These airports are basically the 10 largest in the world. John F. Kennedy in New York, Los Angeles International, London Heathrow, Hong Kong International, Beijing capital are among them. Airports and airplanes are close, confined areas with large mobile populations who have dirty hands. Nicolaides calculated that if 60% of travelers had clean hands, the potential to slow a global disease rose to 69%. But even if just 30% of travelers had clean hands, the spread of disease could drop by 24%. Nicolaides says educating the public is the key. Carol Pearson, VOA News, Washington.
Immunizations are vitally important, and the World Health Organization says vaccinations currently prevent 2 to 3 million deaths each year. Vaccines protect against more than 25 debilitating or life-threatening diseases, including measles, polio, meningitis, influenza, and cervical cancer, according to the WHO. In 2018, an estimated 19 million infants worldwide were not reached with routine immunization services. 60% of these children live in 10 countries, including Angola, Brazil, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Nigeria, and Vietnam. Medical experts say 1 in 5 African children lack access to the basic vaccines that could prevent child mortality. For more insight on the importance of immunizations, we are joined in the studio by Dr. Chizoba Monodi, Nigeria Country Director for the International Vaccine Access Center of the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Dr. Monodi, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, give us a sense of the landscape of immunizations on the African continent.
So in Africa, about 1 in 5 children don't receive the vaccines that they require. Having said that, I should also point out that that means that 4 in 5 actually get the vaccines they need. Yes. So what this means is that we are definitely making progress, but the progress on immunization has stalled. So there's something we call stagnation in the coverage of immunization, where for the past 10 years or so, coverage has only been at about 80%, 85%.
So why are we seeing this stagnation?
We're seeing this stagnation for a variety of reasons. First of all, it's easier to increase coverage when you're at the lower level. So it's easier to go from 0 to 20% than to go from 60% to 80%. Okay. So by the time you get to 80%, you can say most of the low-hanging fruits have been plucked, right? The children who are easier to vaccinate have been vaccinated. So, but what we then need to do is to focus on the fifth child, that is called. That's the last 20%, which is harder to reach. And some of the reasons why it's at that level is, number one, lack of knowledge. So in Nigeria, for example, where we have 7 million children born every year that need to be vaccinated, about half of them don't get vaccinated. And one of the main reasons is that the parents are not aware of immunization. So there's a lot that we need to do to educate the parents to avail themselves of immunization.
So how do we reach that fifth child? You talk about educating the parents. What else? How do we do that first, and what else can we do?
That fifth child is mostly in a number of places. Number one is in rural areas, remote rural areas. That's where you're likely to find that fifth child. Another place you're likely to find a fifth child is in the urban slums. And then a third place is, where you have conflict. So conflict prevents health workers from getting to those children. For example, in northeast Nigeria, where you have Boko Haram and all that. So if we have targeted interventions that will reach rural, remote rural, urban slums, and conflict-affected areas, we have a better chance of reaching the fifth child.
And so how is your organization really changing this landscape for more positive results?
So my organization, the International Vaccine Access Center at the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, works with government to provide technical assistance. And one of the things we're trying to do is to look at how we can use SMS reminders to improve uptake of immunization. So we have a study in northern Nigeria where we will send SMS reminders to parents to let them know that take your child tomorrow or in 2 days' time to get vaccinated. But there are a number of different approaches to do that. The first one is in terms of education, lack of education, we need to put out information out there through the media, through traditional leaders, through social media, through women's groups. Another thing that needs to happen is to support and strengthen the cold chain system so that vaccines are available at the points where they need them. In Nigeria, for example, the last 5 or 10 years, Gavi and other partners have really supported the government to expand the cold chain capacity. Okay. So whereas before where you had, maybe just a few fridges and freezers, but now you have cold chain capacity going to different wards and different communities.
And speaking of Gavi, this year is the Gavi replenishment, and it's a time where leaders gather to talk about investment in vaccine and immunization. Why is this year important, and what is to be expected?
This is a very, very important year for Gavi, and indeed for all the countries that Gavi supports, because if Gavi doesn't have the funding, then it doesn't flow down to the countries. We're expecting that at least the donors will give as much as they gave last replenishment, which was 7.4 billion. Okay. So if they give more, that would be fantastic, because Gavi has done a great job. In the last 20 years they've been in existence, 760 million children vaccinated, 22 million lives saved, several new vaccine introductions supported across the country. In Nigeria, for example, Gavi has supported 5 different new vaccines to be introduced. Okay. And those are vaccines against pneumonia, against hepatitis, which causes cancer, yes. Vaccines against meningitis.
So many diseases.
So Gavi has really supported countries to introduce new vaccines that will save more lives.
Okay, we have to leave it there. Dr. Wonodi, we'll be keeping an eye on it. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Dr. Chizoba Wonodi is the Nigeria Country Director for IVAC, Johns Hopkins, Bloomberg School of Public Health. And that's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on Twitter at Lenore Mudu. Esther, back to you.
Thank you, Lenore. Be sure to watch Lenore Mudu's health reports every Tuesday right here on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a good evening.